Hey everyone, this is Rahul with the Alternative Investors Hangout, and today we're going to have a different type of podcast. I'm going to bring on one of my relatives, Amar. How he's related to me, he's the second cousin of my father. So we met up at a wedding of my cousin, I think a few months back, and then we talked, and we had a lot of things in common when it comes to the size of government and how government should be run. Thanks for coming on, Amar.
Thank you, Rahul, for having me on, and it was great seeing you a few months ago at the wedding.
Indeed. So, we're talking about liberalism when we met. So, what's the problem with liberalism?
Okay, well, let me ask you a question, because the word liberalism is used quite a lot. What do you mean when you say liberalism, or what do people, do you think, in general mean when they use that term?
Well, I'm not talking about the classical liberal, which was defined with all these guys in the 1700s. I'm talking about the classical liberal in terms of the liberal from the 1960s onward, because the definition of liberalism has changed over time.
Yeah, well, certainly the word has been used differently over time, and that's definitely the case. I think when we look at the word liberal, it's actually derived from a Latin word with the root word liber. That means free. And the kind of freedom that was originally meant by the term liberal or liberalism was freedom for the individual, meaning liberty, individual liberty and individual responsibility. And those are, in fact, values that are opposite to what the modern left puts out there and promotes, and opposite to its program of, essentially attaining control over all the levers of society. So I think it's important that we clarify our terms, anytime we talk about things, so that we're clear, because if you look at the word in the dictionary, the word liberal means other things. It means open-minded. It means forward-thinking. And when we associate, it's quite. It makes sense that the left co-opted the term liberal because of all its many positive connotations and because of its connection to the founding of this country. In Europe, if you look at it, European leftists do not refer to themselves as liberals. They just call themselves left. I think they're a little more honest in Europe, but it's only in America that they use the term liberal, because our country, the United States of America, was founded upon a philosophy known as classical liberalism, which you just referred to. So does that make sense so far?
Yeah, it does.
It's the left, which seeks to essentially control society for its own purposes, which are multifarious in nature, which we can get into, has co-opted terms like liberal, and it has used terms like right wing to refer to all of their opposition. Here in the United States. So actually right wing and left wing are European concepts that leftists have themselves brought here. So the two sides that we're dealing with here in America are the American conservative side, which is classical liberalism on the one hand, and leftism, which is essentially an import from Europe on the other hand. That's what's going on. Whereas the leftists now call themselves liberals and have gotten others to call them liberals, and they call the classical liberals, the American conservatives, right wing, and they call the leftists call all of their opposition right wing. They've been doing that for generations now, so that they could associate, they could lump Ronald Reagan in the same camp as Adolf Hitler or Benito Mussolini, or Francisco Franco, or the KKK, which at one time was anti-communist, and that was during and after World War I. So they do that to lump in the classical liberals who believe in individual liberty, along with the despots of the right wing who don't believe in individual liberty, but who also want to control society in a different way. So really, right wing and left wing, these European concepts, are just two competing forms of despotism, whereas this uniquely American third way, classical liberalism, or what we call specifically American conservatism, seeks to uphold and protect the sacred rights and liberties of every individual. Okay, so you see we're really dealing with not one political spectrum, but three political spectra, two of which are on the axis of, shall we call them, despotism, since they both want control. They just have different means of going about it and different ways of dealing with civilization. Whereas we have this third way, this American way, just third in number, not third in order. This third way, the American way of classical liberalism, which is a philosophy of the founding generation of this country, which seeks to uphold and protect the rights of the individual. Those rights include religious rights, family and marriage rights, and property and labor rights. So does that help at least start us off?
Yeah, it does start us off.
Okay.
The thing is, though, how did this definition of classical liberalism turn into a, not moderate definition of liberalism, but how did it transform from classical liberal to liberal over this time? Did you look into that or not really?
Well, I think it happened during the 20th century. I think we can look to its roots in the progressive movement, which at one time was exemplified by President Woodrow Wilson, a progressive, self-styled progressive, who believed, in his own words, that the Constitution should be interpreted according to the Darwinian principle. Okay, he is the first president to actually express this level of contempt for the Constitution. He was a Darwinist, and so he did not believe in individual liberty. He believed in Darwinism, that some people are better than others. Some people should rule, other people should be ruled. And of course, that pool of rulers is always a small pool of people. Whereas everyone else, the plebeians, they're many in number. So I believe the term from my research, it started with the progressives. Progressive became a sort of bad word at a certain period, after Wilson's time, and the term liberal was adopted. And I think that happened because, and the things that the progressives under Woodrow Wilson and after him in the Democrat Party were proposing and promoting, and there were some progressives in the Republican Party as well at that time. We're talking the 19-teens, 1920s and onward. But we're primarily talking about a Democrat phenomenon. Progressive kind of became a dirty word, so they adopted liberal. And I think the country, the United States as a whole, had moved far away over the generations from its classical liberal roots. And I think that's why these big government programs that occurred or big government intrusions that occurred under Woodrow Wilson and then later under FDR, a great deal of intrusion occurred because Americans had lost contact with this idea that a government has certain specific functions that it must do and others that it should not deal with or should not get into, and that there is this division of responsibility between the state governments and the federal government. We started to have a federal government that grew and grew and grew, all under the guise of liberalism. Okay, so So liberal sounding terminology was used. The language of individualism was used. The language of liberation, the terms liberation were used. Where the actual, the first use of the term liberal to describe big government statism was used in this country, I don't have an actual date, but it did happen over a period of time, and I believe that was starting with the progressive era under Woodrow Wilson.
Do you think that this has happened because the progressives, what they've done is they've brought in every group to the United States, and what they've done is that they said, okay, you're of this background, so vote for us. And instead of voting based on philosophy, just like the classical liberals maybe back in the day would advocate, these group of progressives wanted to say, okay, you are of, or you're black, you're Hispanic, you're a lady, you're a new immigrant, so you could come on board, and this is how we're going to pass this agenda. Because a little bit over time, I think this is one of the reasons why they have done this, or how they've been able to do this. They've just categorized people based on their skin color or affiliation, whatnot, and as a result of this, this has caused the problems of more intrusion in our lives.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what you're getting at is a phenomenon that I talk about, that I teach about and lecture about, and all over the country, which I've been doing. This phenomenon of tribalism. Okay, and tribalism is something that I define very precisely, but it's something that I think we can all understand and make sense of. Tribalism is this idea, it's this perspective of the world where the world is seen as a dangerous and threatening place for oneself and for one's own kind. And how one's own kind is defined, it can be in many ways. It could be based on race, skin color, religion, ethnic origin, national origin, even profession, social class, gender even, or sexual orientation. There are all different kinds of ways that people can parse themselves out into a group identity, into a tribe. And the thing is, we human beings are hardwired from the lower part of our brains, not the higher part of our brains, but the lower part of our brains, the animal brain, to be tribalistic as a matter of survival. Okay, but we still have these things, even though we don't live in a world of scarcity anymore. We still have this tribalistic brain equipment. We're talking about the hypothalamus, which gives us the fight or flight response, the limbic system, which governs things like anger and fear. So these are survival emotions. Okay, so we all have these things. And so the tribalistic person, and this is not to put any group down or any people down, all our ancestors lived in tribes. They all needed this brain equipment to survive. So they saw the world as a dangerous and threatening place for themselves and for their kind. And basic survival was their top priority. So they had to have a leader to help them survive, to organize the group, the tribe, to divide labor, and to protect them from any enemy tribes whose very existence would threaten their own, because resources were scarce. Water was scarce, food was scarce, land was scarce, everything was scarce, a good place to live was scarce. Okay, and you're in competition with others. So there are always enemy tribes out there whose very existence was a threat to one's own existence and the existence of one's own group or tribe. And so that naturally has to have attached to it this idea that one must destroy the enemy tribe and its leader in order to survive. If we don't get them, they'll get us. Okay, and so what the left has done, the left has tapped into this sensibility that human beings naturally have, that there is an enemy out there, out to get you, and we will protect you from that enemy. Vote for us, and we will protect you. We will vanquish that enemy. And that enemy is the Republican Party, or the white people, or the males, or the capitalists, or the Christians, or the conservative Christians, okay, or the whatever, or the priesthood, or whatever. They will define an enemy out there who is their political enemy. The left will do this, and they'll say, those are the bad people. They're out to get you. As Joe Biden said, they're going to put you all back in chains, right? Or they want to push grandma from a cliff, right? Or any of a number of other things, as President Obama said to an audience of Latino folks, Latino Americans. He said that we need to punish our enemies and reward our friends. Okay, this is common terminology. This is the way leftists talk: enemy, friend, good guy, good tribe, bad tribe. They're out to get you, right? Vote for us, and we'll keep them away. Those bad people, those evil people, and they'll use terms like sexist, intolerant, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, racist, bigoted. Okay, they'll use terms like that, or they hate old people. They're out to get you. Okay, so this is tribalism. They're appealing. What the left does is it appeals to people's tribalistic sensibilities, and this is what the Democrat Party has always been. It has always been the party of tribalism. This is very important to understand. In our country, since the 1920s, when the Democrat Party was founded and had its first president in Andrew Jackson, the Democrat Party has always been the party of tribalism. In the early times, it was the party of WASP tribalism. Of course, WASP stands for White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. It was for that tribe, the tribalism of the Southerners. Okay, the Democrat Party basically came out of the South, and the South was created by the English Crown, essentially in the image of English society as the English Crown saw it. Those were all established by royal charter, the Southern colonies. And the Democrat Party came out of that culture, which had a very set, defined class system, and a low class of serfs known as elite men, and an even lower caste known as slaves from Africa. And so a tribalism was inherently there in that system, which the Democrat Party came into existence to service in the 1820s. So it has always been. So in earlier times, it was a party of lost tribalism, and it was right up until the 1960s when we saw the Democrat Party was preventing lots of civil rights acts from being passed, which the Republican Party was trying to pass. Anything that passed was usually a watered down bill, as long as the Democrats held control of Congress or the Senate, where they could and did filibuster many bills, including the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which was put forward which was championed very much in the Senate by Senator Everett McKinley Dirksen of Illinois, who was Republican, the Republican minority leader. That was a Democrat Party. It was in earlier times a party of lost tribalism. Then in the 1960s, a change happened. Two big changes happened. Well, for one, the supply of WASPs, if you will, started dwindling, and newer groups of people, other groups from Europe and other groups of people from around the world their numbers started increasing. There was a 1964 Immigration Act, which allowed for more people to enter the country from other countries. Many were educated people from Asia, and others, not so educated. But we were seeing a greater mix of people in the country. So the WASP tribalism gravy train was necessarily drying up, if you will. And then the other change that happened was the left took over the Democrat Party. Okay, that was the big thing. I think that we saw that in 1972 with the nomination of George McGovern to run for president under the Democrat ticket, or on the Democrat ticket. So we saw this transformation, and now what the left does, is and has been since the time of the Frankfurt School leftist academics. Frankfurt School, we're talking 1923, after World War I. These Frankfurt School folks from Germany, that's Frankfurt, Germany. Okay, so there was a school of Marxists known as the Frankfurt School. After World War I, they came to many countries, including the U.S. One of those people was named Herbert Marcuse, very well known. People should know his name, Marcuse, M-A-R-C-U-S-E. Herbert Marcuse died in 1974. Very influential in the formation of the New Left, as we know it today. The idea of the New Left, as propounded by Herbert Marcuse in a very sly way, okay, was that they would now, and I'm putting this in my own words, since the Marxist way of thinking, the Marxist understanding of the economy did not come to pass, okay, capitalism did not automatically give way to socialism as he predicted, and socialism did not automatically give way to communism as he predicted. It just didn't happen. So these Marxists of the Frankfurt School were kind of left in a dilemma. What do we do now? Marxist theory was clearly shown to be wrong. It didn't happen in America. It didn't happen in Great Britain. It didn't happen in France. It didn't happen in Germany. Where did communism take root? It took root in Russia, which was an agrarian society, not an industrial society. And so that was not considered a great prize after World War II. That was an agrarian country. Their real prize was to take over an industrial country. But why were the masses not embracing socialism? Well, that was their dilemma. Marx's theory proved to be wrong. So they had to find another strategy. And in short, what they did is they turned to tribalism. They figured this: let's divide society up. Let's rewrite, let's falsify the histories of every society where we want leftism to take over. And let's rewrite that history of every country to basically to create oppressed tribes in the narrative and an oppressor tribe in the narrative. Okay, the oppressor tribe will be represented by the traditional religion of that society, the concepts of family and marriage, traditional concepts of family and marriage in that society, and the pursuits of property and labor in that society, private property that is. in that society, by which I mean economic liberty. So the pursuit of economic liberty, or the expression of economic liberty, and traditional religion, and family and marriage. Those three things, as traditionally understood, will be demonized, and they will be shown to be, or they will be made out to be, the victimizer of all the oppressed tribes, supposedly oppressed tribes in that society. So, and not all of them were supposedly oppressed. Some were really oppressed, like African Americans in America. They were most definitely oppressed. But who they blamed for that became white people. Okay, it became Christianity. It became patriarchy. It became capitalism. Okay, all those things, those are the culprit. They are the ones who put black people in chains. They are the ones who put 110,000 people of Japanese descent, Americans of Japanese descent, into detention camps during World War II. Okay, it was it was that complex of things, of traditional things, religion, family and marriage, and private property pursuits that oppressed the American Indians, that pushed them off their land. It was just greed. It was capitalistic greed that did it. Okay, that's what they will blame. They'll blame capitalism. They'll blame white people. They'll blame Christianity. They'll blame patriarchy. Okay, which is their understanding of traditional family. They'll blame all of those things for all the oppression, all the ills of society, all the wars, all the poverty, all the oppression. Okay, so does that make sense so far?
Yeah, it does.
So I'm giving you, I'm drawing a big canvas here. I'm sorry, but so now what does the left do today? So when people come in to the country, or when they appeal to people, they are appealing from that sense of tribalism. There's a bad group of people out there out to get you. Okay, we will protect you. Vote for us. We're the good guys. And it works oftentimes because we human beings are born with this brain machinery, this mental machinery of the lower brain, which predisposes us to this, unless we are given something better to think about, so higher values to think about. So what they do is classical liberalism is an individualistic philosophy. It's all about individual liberty, individual rights, individual responsibilities. Whereas tribalism, or leftism, leftism today, which uses tribalism, the tribalistic sensibilities of people, seeks to give people a group identity, a group mentality, a tribal mentality, a collective way of looking at oneself, not as an individual, but as a member of a group. And they're able to manipulate people. And this is something that despotic people have been doing since time immemorial. But it's a great way to get people to follow you if you want to control them. Just say, hey, there are bad people out there, the enemy's out there, they're going to get us. Support me, and I will lead us into victory. Look at the regimes the regime of the communist regime in North Korea. Regardless of what's going on with the United States, they are constantly feeding their people propaganda. America is about to attack us. The enemy is being kept at bay by our glorious leader, by our dear leader. And so I'm not saying that the modern Democrats are communists. I'm just saying that they are manipulating people in a similar way. They're using the certain aspects of the human mind in a very similar, nearly identical way.
The thing that I wanted to go back into is you talked about family. In the 1960s, we had LBJ. He had this Great Society program, and basically what happened was he allowed all these families or all these women who had kids out of wedlock to get all this government aid. In the 1930s, you had FDR's advisor, I think her name was Frances Perkins. She said that, you know what, maybe you shouldn't give all this aid to ladies who have kids out of wedlock and decide to raise the kid. And because of that, that has led to the breakdown of family, and this is how the left has won, in my opinion, as well. And this has led to what you were talking about, tribalism, saying that, hey, it's the fault of these white racists and so on that there are all these problems going on, but the problem is the breakdown of family. So do you agree with what I'm trying to say, that the left also accomplished something big that way in the 1960s?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That was the idea, break up the family. let me read for you something from one of the early utopian socialists. This will give you a lot of insight. It will give you and all of our listeners a great deal of insight into what the left is all about. We're going back now to the early origins of the left in the 1820s. So there were various thinkers known as utopian socialists. They were called utopian socialists by Karl Marx decades later because he considered himself a scientific socialist. He tried to turn history into a science in the model of the philosopher Hegel, the German philosopher Hegel. Whereas he called these other guys utopian socialists. They believed in utopia. Well, who were these guys? These were men by the names of Charles Fourier, who was a product of the French Revolution, another guy, Henri de Saint-Simon, who was also a product of the French Revolution, and a gentleman named Robert Owen from Wales, Britain. Now, Robert Owen, he, and as well as Charles Fourier and other utopian socialists, actually founded socialist colonies here in the United States, in Ohio and Texas, New Jersey, and various other places. And his ideas were a strong influence on Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who founded communism. Now, it was Robert Owen who created what he called a fundamentalistic belief system called socialism, what he called a rational religion. The rational religion as opposed to other religions which are irrational. Very important that he's using the term religion to refer to his belief system known as socialism, and he called it socialism. I believe it was he who coined the term socialism, Robert Owen, that is. That's Owen, O-W-E-N. His followers met in these quasi-churches that were called halls of science, okay, where they heard sermons on free love and they sang social hymns, as they were called. Now, he wrote in 1826 a document called the Declaration of Mental Independence. Now, 1826, do you know what might be the significance of that year, perhaps, 1826, if our country was founded in a certain year?
1776, so 50.
The 50-year anniversary of the signing of the American Declaration of Independence. On that occasion, it was dated, in fact, July 4th, 1826. He wrote his Declaration of Mental Independence. And in there, he attacked, and I'm going to give you a direct quote from that document. He attacked, quote, the trinity of evils responsible for all the world's misery and vice, traditional religion, conventional marriage, and private property. Okay, traditional religion, conventional marriage, and private property. Destroying conventional marriage was their goal from the beginning. Why? Why would they want to destroy marriage and families? The reason is simple. If you want to tell other people what to do, and you want them to follow your religion of socialism, well, you must break up the family. If I want your son to do what I want him to do as a dictator, then he cannot be doing what his mom and dad want him to do or are telling him to do. The family must be undermined. It must be weakened. It must be made subservient. It must serve the purposes of the state. And it must be broken up, ultimately. And that became possible in an industrialized society where there was an excess of capital, and there was capital to be redistributed. In a poverty-ridden society, that becomes a little more difficult, but where there is a lot of capital to be redistributed, that becomes more plausible and more. It can be sold to the people more easily. When you see lots of people with a lot and others who don't have as much, people can say, hey, how come that person has more and I have less? I want what he has. It's not fair. Okay, so it's easy to appeal to those sensibilities in an industrialized society where there is a lot of excess of capital, and there are people with more due to whatever their hard work, their investments, whatever it may be, and others who have less. Now, actually, the founding fathers in the Federalist Papers even pointed this out, that one of the major causes of factionalism is the uneven distribution of property, which is going to happen in a society where there is liberty. So they in fact anticipated that this could be a problem, but liberty would be the solution. Give everyone the same rights, and in exercising those rights, people will keep each other in check, while not trampling upon the substantive, unalienable rights of their fellow human beings. So you see, when you're talking about breaking up the family with policies like the New Deal under FDR and like the Great Society under LBJ, President Johnson. This is by design. This is a way of taking control away from the things that normally control people or normally guide people in this world: traditional religion, conventional marriage, and private property for the pursuits of one's own prosperity. Away from that and to this belief system of socialism, which ultimately keeps certain people in power, the socialists, the statists. So you see, socialism is there was another way of controlling a society before leftism came about, starting with its baby steps in the French Revolution in the late 1700s. That was the classical right-wing way. Now I'm calling it right-wing. It's a bit of an anachronism to call it that, since that came about in the French Revolution, but it's what we would today call right-wing. It's where you have these three institutions, these three foundational institutions of civilization: religion, marriage and family, number two, and number three, property and labor. These three things, these three foundational building blocks of civilization. You have these three things. Rather than seeking to attack, undermine, and destroy them as leftists do and would later, when they came into existence, in earlier times, since time immemorial, up until the late 1700s, early 1800s, the way to control a society was not by attacking, undermining, and destroying religion, marriage, and property and labor, as Robert Owen was calling for, and as the other utopian socialists and later leftists, communists, and others were calling for. Not by doing those things, but by rather manipulating those things, co-opting those things, and trying to strengthen them and control them and coercing people in a certain way to make those three institutions work in the favor of the despot, of the monarch, of the dictator of the state. So rather than trying to undermine and attack and destroy religion, whatever the majority religion may be, whether that's American Christianity here in America, or Christianity in Europe, or Islam in the Middle East, or Hinduism in India, or Buddhism and Taoism in China, whatever the dominant religion is, rather than trying to destroy it, you instead co-opt it. You say, rather than there is no God, you say, our God exists and he is so great, he made me your leader. I'm sitting on the throne because God put me here, our great God. Okay, so you see, that's how religion was manipulated. Now marriage, how is marriage manipulated? How are people coerced in that way by the right-wing regimes of the past? Well, that was by telling people, hey, rather than not being married, rather than kicking the man out of the house and being dependent on the state, where that system didn't exist back then. No, get married, have a long-lasting marriage, so that you keep producing sons to join in our leader's glorious army. Okay, keep producing people. We need people to go fight, to do things, to serve the master, to serve the leader, the monarch. Okay, and property and labor, rather than, hey, sit at home and be lazy and collect a check, as leftists, the mentality that leftists promote today, rather than that, no, don't be lazy. Work long and hard so that you pay your taxes and you make our leader and his loyal friends richer and more powerful. Okay, so do you see the difference? The old way of controlling a society was by manipulating and co-opting and coercing people in those three foundational building blocks of civilization. The new way, the leftist way of controlling society, was by eroding and eradicating those same three institutions. Okay, so
I agree. Go ahead.
Yeah, so did that help clarify things?
It indeed did. And the last thing I did want to close off by is saying that I agree with many of the things that you're saying, but I do believe that the right wing right now uses similar tactics. I don't think that they're the classical liberals of the late 1790s, but maybe we could talk about that in another podcast. And until then, thanks for coming on again, Amar.
Thank you, Rahul. I really appreciate your time, and thank you, everyone, for listening.
All right.